Welcome to the 100 Master Coaches series featuring master coaches from around the world. Let's journey together on this 100 Master Coaches series with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. Andrew Sheridan is a Master Certified Coach and a co-founder of the Mindful Business Alliance, MBA, an international coaching, training, and consulting firm that helps organizations improve employee engagement, retention, and productivity. Andrew is also senior faculty at the Coactive Training Institute, a member of Google's Mastery faculty team, and president of the Luxembourg chapter of the International Coaching Federation. Now on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the 100 Master Coaches show. This is Coach Mal, and today on the show is Andrew Sheridan. Now, Andrew comes from a variety of backgrounds. Now, he is British and also Luxembourg with that European heritage. And he lives in Hong Kong. So why don't we first give him a warm welcome. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thanks, Mal. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to host you. You're currently in Hong Kong right now, I hear.
That's right, yes. I've been in Hong Kong for a couple of months since the borders became a little bit easier to come across in these crazy times.
Definitely. We live in such amazing times these days. And I'm so glad that the borders are open and we can get back to some sort of normal in this new version of it. Thank you again for making time. We're obviously going to talk a lot about you and how your journey of coaching came about. But before we go there, maybe you would like to do a little bit of an intro of who Andrew is.
Sure. A big existential coach question right there. Who is Andrew? Well, you named it. I have a British family background. I was born in Luxembourg, so I'm a very proud citizen of Luxembourg and get to call myself Luxembourgish as well as British.
Yes.
A lot of the last 10 years or even a little more, 10 years or so in Asia, mostly Malaysia and Singapore, more recently Hong Kong. And I started my work life in banking. So I went from 10 years of banking, transitioned into coaching in 2009, and I've been doing that ever since in all sorts of different parts of the world.
Yeah, I did read about your banking background. I'm just curious, right? What is it with that? I mean, it's a beautiful story. Don't get me wrong, right? Beautiful story, right? One of my best friends is or was an ex-banker, right, for 20 years, and now obviously is an amazing leadership coach. And you've made that shift as well. So love to hear a little bit more about that.
I mean, I think not by design. I think it's more like it becomes an interesting story when you look at it backwards. But I did a job for 10 years, which was very much relationship driven. So I looked after organizational clients working with us.
Yeah.
And it got me lots of travel and to meet lots of people. But what I really liked in it was the relationship part, actually connecting with other people and relating in ways that felt authentic and real and so on. And contrasting with really difficult culture. You know, this is the very late 90s, early 2000s. And that industry was tough. People were tough. And certainly it was all about making money, but almost sort of very much for yourself. And I was just really aware of this big gap between what we're doing and who we're being. And found myself in a coaching course in 2004, and it was pretty transformational. I suddenly realized this is the gap, the way we're relating in the workplace. And so it started a journey of self-discovery and things that I think many people can relate to. And I was able to take a career break in 2007 and kind of redirect myself. So not a plan, but it was a pretty cool outcome. I'm not unhappy with where it went. There were some scary moments, but I'm definitely not unhappy about it.
Well, congratulations. It's been many a years since then. Have you ever regretted that move? I mean, obviously you enjoyed your stint in banking, and obviously if you stayed long enough, there is tons of people to meet and money to make, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think I've never regretted it. I had some moments where I was pretty afraid because there was a sort of the transition between, you know, having the relative safety of a job and a salary and all the things that came with that. And I was in a good position, you know, but I never regretted it because I think I very quickly transitioned into this sense of what it means to be doing more work that feels purposeful and
Mm,
by choice. I would also like, I don't think I would say that I enjoyed my banking days. I think I appreciated what it gave me, the
okay.
stability, the ability to, buy a home and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But the work itself, I found a little bit disheartening.
Mm.
Um, so some regrets when, my bank account was a little empty or, those kind of things. Sometimes I envied my friends who were talking about their bonuses and I was like, I'm,
Yes.
I'm
Taking
slowly,
beautiful
slowly making,
trips at the end of the
yeah,
year, and so on
you know,
and so forth. Yeah. Mm.
exactly.
Mm.
So I don't regret leaving the industry, but I definitely had some moments where I was a little unsure if I had been too impulsive, let's say.
Yeah, I can resonate with that because I've also
Mm,
made that jump, right, from corporate, right? I came from a marketing background and
I
had many friends tell me I was crazy, right, to make that
oh yeah,
shift, right? It's like, oh my gosh, what are you thinking about now? Yeah,
yeah.
so it's definitely a shift. It's definitely a step forward, and we're glad that you made it. And hey, you're on the show today.
Thanks, Mel. But I think you're right. Like it's a very relatable experience. I think for a lot of coaches, that idea of stepping out, we do find a lot of safety in the roles
Mm,
and especially
mm.
organizational ones, right? So yeah, relatable in reverse. I hear you, sir.
Yeah. And the stepping out actually, there are a couple of things that we obviously need to get used to, right? Besides the whole money thing and security and all of that. I recognize because I work with very amazing young budding coaches coming into, and I'm sure you do as well. And often they look at us and we're like, you look so successful, but how was it at the early days? Right? So let's kind of track back on that earlier days when you stepped
Mm.
out, being your own boss, entrepreneur. What was that like?
I think as I look back at it these days,
Yeah.
it was a little bit all over the place. I want to say
Mm.
sort of like respectfully chaotic, I think is what comes to mind. I think
Okay.
practically speaking, it was really exciting. I was very, very determined. And it was also lonely. I'm not going to the office I'm not traveling with other colleagues or
Yeah.
meeting a lot of people in group settings. It's, much more, as you know, one to one. And
Yeah.
it was a little bit bewildering sometimes. And I think when I look back at it now, I sometimes like, wow, it worked out anyway. But I
Yeah.
didn't have a plan. I didn't have a structure really. I had connected to why it felt important to do this. But it
Mm.
was a little all over. And I definitely had some sleepless nights. It's Christmas presents or a full kitchen, not both, or full fridge. Like I definitely had moments. You mentioned like, people's
Yeah.
bonuses and holidays. And not going anywhere for a while
Yeah.
there, and I had young children at the time, and
Yeah.
and so I think there was quite a lot of sense of sacrifice of having to go without things for a while,
Mm.
and sort of underpinned by determination to make it because I knew I was doing something that was right for me. I
Mm.
wasn't always sure how it was going to end up, and I certainly couldn't have imagined where it would end up this many years later. But yeah, I guess exciting, uncertain, sometimes sleepless. Um, but endlessly optimistic. Perhaps that's what comes of being, at that stage of life too. I was around 30 years old when I left my job, so it was yeah, a mix of different things, a bit of a
Mm.
blender.
Yeah. I'm thinking back about my Blender days too, huh? And
Yeah,
I think it kind of never ends, isn't it? I mean, we go on to a new level of awareness of ourselves and appreciation of what we have and the people we have surrounded us with. And that's just getting used to, isn't it? Getting used to the new
yeah.
way of uh, hustling or even being, right? As you are happy with yourself, happy with what you have achieved, and there's just so much of that coming out and working with the best of the best people out there.
I think there's something
Congratulations.
really. Thanks, Mel. Yeah, and likewise, I think there's you use the word hustle, and it makes me think of it like it's kind of like a step process. I think in the very early years, There's a sense of where's my next gig, where's my next
Yeah.
contract. That always that kind of sense of you got to keep filling the pot. And what I noticed over time, and I've seen this with others, and perhaps you can relate too, is at a certain point you learn to trust it. There is
Mm,
always something. There is always something coming. There is always something new. We're always growing and evolving. It comes with the maturity of time, I suppose, and experience. But I feel less of the hustle these days and a lot more of the
mm,
gratitude. I feel much more like harvesting. A lot of years of planting seeds, and
yeah.
the last good few years have been more like harvesting.
Mm, that's beautiful.
Mm.
I hear you're also the proud founder, past president, and current president of the ICF Luxembourg. Tell us about that journey there.
A lot of roles in that. I spent a couple of years in Australia in I think it's 2007, a little over a year and a half or so. And when I was in Australia, I went to a couple of ICF chapter meetings. And when I came back to Luxembourg, I got a phone call from this guy who said, someone in the ICF in Australia told me you were heavily involved in the chapter, and I want to build one. Can you help? And I was like, I went to like 2 meetings or something as a member. Um, but I liked his energy, and he was a great guy, Jean Pierre. He was my first
Mm,
full on business partner in the end. And he and I sat down and we decided to put together a chapter, and we both felt quite invested in educating the local community in Luxembourg around coaching. It's a
mm,
very small country, a bit like a Singapore, for example, but with fewer people. Disproportionately high level of really well educated people because of
yeah.
business and the EU. And so we built this chapter, and Jean Pierre was president, and I was vice president, and we built it, and we were very excited when we got to charter status. Um, and then I took over from Jean Pierre. I can't remember 2 or 3 years in, and I did 2 or 3 years as a president, and then I moved away. Went to live in Asia, and I came back to Europe during COVID, and I just turned up at an AGM, and the entire board decided it was time to stop. Bless them. It had been
Oh,
really hard. COVID was
okay.
really tough, and they were ready for new things, and it was kind of sort of sitting there hanging.
Mm,
And I started to realize nobody was putting their hand up at all. And I felt a little thing of like I was part of initiating this many years prior. I think it was 2008 or nine, and I felt this sort of like it could end here. That's kind of sad. And a lot of
yeah.
people, especially during COVID, are actually getting their training done and they're looking for support. So I put my hand up, and I felt a bit like maybe a caretaker, keep it going for a while. I called in a few other people that I knew, and actually, it's been a very sweet second iteration in a president role. So about a year and a half into that 2 year role now, and during that, let's say a couple of months ago, I came back to Hong Kong. So there's a bit
Mm,
of back and forth at the moment, but the board is doing a great job keeping it running. We just do our meetings at different times of day.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's been a really interesting and again a very unexpected journey, but it's helpful. I think, especially for people who are newer in the industry, it's helpful to have a place to go and meet people and also talk to people who've been around longer. So I do feel a really important sense of contribution in that respect. So happy to do my time one more time.
One more time.
Yeah.
Well, I've done my time as well. I
Mm,
think perhaps it's also time to go back. This is to me, it's like family, right? It's like family
mm,
you've not seen for a while, and then you just want to go back and have time with them.
right.
And I don't think you were just caretaker. I think it was that heart of yours of wanting to see what you've started and not just how it's grown, but to have the sustainability and the sense of, as you
Mm,
say, contribution back to the people that will come continuously, especially right now when things are a lot better. So well done on
And
stepping in.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's important. I remember feeling a little lost in the early days, as I was saying before, and I think it's important to offer
Mm,
that sort of sense of it is okay over time. You get better at this, you get stronger. It's possible to be in community, even if we're mostly working alone. I think it's
yeah.
important to be able to offer that sort of reassurance to people that that exists
And it's funny you say that about being alone, because it is true. It is pretty much a lonely journey, and if we stick to ourselves, that's all right in a sense. But I think we all made for a bit of that community, and I think that's what ICF has done for me as well, lots. And I'm very thankful that the ICF has been what it is for me through the years. It's contributed to my growth even.
Yeah.
You're very passionate about humanizing the workplace, right? Tell us a little bit more about that statement.
Yeah, so humanizing the workplace is I don't know if you call it a tagline, but it's definitely a purpose that came from the work that I do with my good buddy and business partner Chuck Allen, who's a fellow MCC and coach in LA. We met through our work at the Coactive Training Institute, where we're both senior faculty, and I had a great time meeting him. I probably 12 or 13 years ago now, but I did some work with him in Asia. We worked on some really interesting projects together, and over time we realized that it would be good to actually build something more formal. We kept coming up with this idea that being mindful about how we work and related together was part of our success. Always looking after the relationship. And so this kind of created the banner of our brand, the Mindful Business Alliance. And what we noticed was in every interaction we're having in organizations, essentially we're coming back to the same thing. Let's put the humans back in the middle. Let's make relationships matter again. It's not more work, it's more of a mindset shift. People are busy already at work. They don't need more tasks and structures and tools and things to work with. But the idea of bringing, of course, what you and I would know as, core coaching skills, better listening, more curiosity, the ability to articulate things that we're noticing, looking for themes, and almost like on a spectrum. If we can bring the relationships piece back in, then the human product piece evolves, right? Happier people, better outcomes. So that's where the humanizing the workplace came from as a concept. And so all the work that we do in the various different ways that we do it is aimed at bringing more of the human back to the center of all of these organizational contexts.
And that's what it should be, right? We often talk about the best assets in companies are the people.
Right.
But
human beings, not human doings and all this. Yeah, right.
And a lot of time it's sometimes the reverse that happens. Huh? And I've worked with a particular organization which will remain unnamed. And one of obviously their tagline is humanizing financial institution. And I think they recognize the fact that that's something that is perhaps not very prevalent in the FI industry. And so that the importance of the person, as you were saying, the relationships, all matters much more than, I guess, the bottom line, because at the end of the day, happier people will garner better and stronger bottom line too.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things Chuck wrote this amazing article probably about 10 years ago, but and the title was something like "You're just lucky to have a job." Okay. Is not a good business strategy. Like, something to that effect. It's kind of like we actually need to invest and develop and grow.
So
the long term is obviously much better than the short term. Yeah. And I think that the sweet spot that we're seeing these days, well, not even sweet spot, but the place for us to be courageous in this, I think, in the kind of work that people like you and I bring is a lot of organizations talk about this, but they're not actually doing a great job with it. They might be offering people mindfulness classes or meditation breaks, but they're not actually doing better at reducing their workload or the pressure. They're giving them tools to cope with the pressure that they put in. And so it's kind of like, can we untangle those a bit and have this be more of a human kind of environment?
Yeah, I'm just thinking it through, right? I mean, as things get harder, there's talk obviously that we're in recession, inflationary challenges everywhere around the world. What do you think is that future of that workplace, right? I mean, part of it is what you're talking about already, but what other, I guess, strategies do you think that a company would need to inculcate to kind of ride through this wave, and not just ride through it, but thrive as a system?
It's so complex, right? I think that there's a few things. Slowing down is one, and that seems kind of like the opposite of what's needed in many ways, but actually slowing down and checking in, like, how are we doing really?
Wow.
Um, Keeping flexible work structures, I think, as you know, one of the curious benefits of COVID in a way. I think I don't have the data to mind, but this kind of this idea that people are actually effective if they have more flexible working styles, if they're able to work from home, more autonomy and trust is developed. So I think building on those kind of things, which have sort of emerged almost by accident as a result of COVID, I think it's super important. I think we're also seeing a lot more of, you know, younger generations kind of going, I won't put up with this. I'm sure, like you, I mean, I've lost count of how many people below the age of about 30 I've spoken to who've gone, I'm not going to work like this just to be partner in 10 years or whatever it is. I think people really want meaning and purpose to be part of their lives now. And I think paying attention to those kind of things and trying to balance and navigate those is going to be really important for organizations to keep going to get this right. And it's complex. Different organizations have different ways of dealing with this or different needs, right? It's not the same if you're running a hospital and you're running a bank, right, or a medical devices company and you know, a factory. So, but I think the key there is flexibility and looking at what people want and need, and having people feel like they're contributing something or a sense of purpose, at least some sort of meaning of that. I think you and I grew up at a time when our parents were just, I think, grateful to have a job for life. That was the goal, right? And we're of a generation where that doesn't really mean anything anymore. And I think for the next generation, it doesn't mean anything, and I want meaning and purpose in the things I do. So yeah, it's a long answer, but I think the organizations that pay attention to these shifts and pay attention to, especially the younger generations, because they are the ones who will end up leading the organization. So what do they need in order to stay in a way that feels good for them?
Not a gold watch after 15 years. Let me say that.
Right. Very much.
Loyalty, right? Because I've heard all of that from my generation and the generation before, right? Mel, stay in that job. Mel, this, Mel, that, right? All the wonderful advice that I've gotten. And obviously some worked, right? Because the systems at play were operating in such a way. But when things shift, and you and I have recognized that even before COVID, there are many things that were already shifting because, yes, the generation coming into the workforce is actually saying, this won't work for me. It's just being that sensitive to that and flexible, as you say, to what is actually happening on the ground. That is really important.
Yes, so true. I think just listening and being really listen, again, back to coaching in a way, right? But like, can we listen? We can't always accommodate, but at least if we listen, people feel seen and heard. And then they are feeling more at choice, right? They're not doing whatever it's called these days, quiet quitting. You know, they're not leaving or checking out, because an unengaged employee is not much more used. But it's definitely shifting. And I think we ignore it at our peril, right? I say we, more organizationally speaking, ignore it at their peril, because it's systemic. It's going to change anyway. So either roll with it or get a little bit left behind.
And you are obviously currently working with one of the best organizations in the world. They've got all the data. Let me just say, they've got all the data to prove it, right? What's working, what's not working. I don't know what's inside. If you could share a little bit of the inside story of this wonderful company that you work with.
Sure.
And I'm sure there are lessons that you're also taking away from working with them and understanding all the things we've been talking about, right? The shifts and the trends and what to look out for.
So of course, the data organization that you mentioned. So got to know some really interesting people from Google quite a few years ago, and right before COVID, they were looking to add some people to what they call a mastery faculty team to do facilitation. So this is their content; it's not our IP. They have some incredibly well designed programs, and we were, you know, just felt like the right time and place for us to put in a pitch and bring in some of our favorite people. And over time, that team has grown. So think it's today, it's 10 or 11 people that we have.
Nice.
And so we're part of a team that is works alongside people internally who run full-time facilitation. And it's been a really exciting partnership. I think for us, the idea of being mindful in our relationships has always been important. And often, as you'll know from your own experience, I think working with large organizations or multinationals can be tricky. You know, there's the ebb and flow, there's the sort of the David and Goliath kind of thing. And COVID came into the middle of this project, or rather, it came in as we were about to go live with this project. And the way that it was handled was really inspiring for us. And we just got right away what an incredibly human-centered organization it is. What at least the part that we're interacting with. So relational, so respectful of us and the impact on us for, you know, late changes, COVID, clearly not their fault. But they were super about helping us to balance it out. And then we immediately got into looking at different ways to do this kind of work with them. And so, of course, the shift to online, right, which has been kind of key for our industry. So helping do facilitation online. And so that's what it is today. Very fun work, a really fun, dynamic team. There's a sort of there's a playfulness, I think, in the Google culture that we find really fun to work with because we're very experiential in the nature of the training work that we do.
Yeah.
It's been a delightful partnership and always something new. My sense of the culture as I look in from the outside is it is, of course, like you say, it's very data driven, but there is a real I think I would want to say like the mindset, and it's obviously just my opinion from what I'm seeing, but the mindset is really people do matter. And for me, that's a tagline of my own kind of sense of purpose is people matter. And I really enjoy the work and I really enjoy seeing the way they treat their people. And they invest in the kinds of things that we're talking about. So yeah, it's maybe it's probably too grand to say they've got it totally nailed. I don't know enough. Of course, it's an enormous organization, but I certainly see that the people we work with, it's fun and it's great for our team because we get some really interesting variety. So it's not just our own intellectual property. We're working with theirs. Yeah, it's a fun and dynamic company to be in partnership with.
Such a great opportunity. I guess, you know, coaches listening on this podcast and the like, will kind of wonder, wow, how do I get into a door like that? And I'm not going to ask you what the strategy was and everything, but I kind of sense that if you put it out there and that people matter, humanizing that whole experience, right? You will kind of attract the right kind of clients to you. Perhaps talk us through how that value of your organization connects to the right clients that you are attracting, so that obviously the coaches listening in will be able to say, okay, I'll have a Google version of who I will probably be attracting, right? We can all probably not all work for Google or with Google. Tell us maybe some thoughts around that.
Yeah. Good news and bad news, I think. I think the good news is anybody in the coaching profession who wants to do work in these types of ways can do that. I think that's the good news. The bad news is I don't think there's a specific roadmap or step to this, at least not that I've experienced. But what I would say is I think if I look back at my own journey and that of a number of people around me, it is definitely the relationship piece. So you got to be out there. You got to be seen. I remember my first year of trying to make stuff work. I was tucked away at home, really working on my website and my flyers. You remember flyers, like paper flyers, and it was really exciting. I had it looked visually great, and I had zero clients because I wasn't out meeting people and talking to people. And that's the tough part. I think that probably the first year or so is probably the toughest it'll ever be because you're starting with nothing behind you. But in the end, your relationships and your networks are what will propel you. And I think
so good.
If I consider your question like specifically, it is relationships over time. It really is just relationships over time. Be available to people, plant seeds, meet people, and be in relationship. Don't be in sales mode. Really just build connections, get to know people, offer your time, contribute in ways that feel useful, and do good work. People talk about you. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the beautiful things about our work is
So
because it's
true.
so human-centered and relational, people will pass your name forward if they enjoyed what they got from you. And it really is relationships over time. If I look at every single piece of work we have today, big companies, small companies, one-on-one, direct leaders, even facilitation when we're doing our trainings for Coactive or for
Yeah.
Google, in the end, all of this came through relationships um, without fail. So I think the kind of classic old, I don't say old school, but the classic marketing approach works to an extent, but we're not selling a product, right? We're not a
Yeah.
commodity. It is an experience, coaching or coach related trainings. So having people have the experience of you as an individual, I think those are the key to building those relationships, which ultimately will get you invited to come through doors that feel right for you. Yeah.
Totally resonate with that, mate.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about how there were times when you were prepping yourself, believing in yourself, and sowing seeds. You said there were years that you were sowing and sowing and sowing. Perhaps this is a season of what you call harvesting before. And I think it's not just obviously immediate. That there are seasons, like in seasons of time, seasons of life, and then obviously in every relationship there is also seasons, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what you say is correct. I've experienced so many times just being available to speak with people, to help them wherever you can possible. I think those are amazing tips that you've shared. And this is so applicable. Thank you, Andrew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Mal. I think well, you get it. I mean, I think it's something that will show up pretty consistently in our industry.
Yeah.
We need to be consistent. We need to be present, and people trust people. Right? People trust people who are being themselves.
Yeah.
Make fun of yourself. Be tell on yourself if you get things wrong. Like be a human because like we don't trust robots as
Yes.
much. So just
Yes.
be yourself, and it immediately puts people more at ease. Yeah. I think the other tip I would offer is reflect on the question like for the sake of what am I doing this, and if it's for
Mm,
money or for building a business just for a particular outcome, it's
mm.
probably going to be a little tougher than if there's a sense of meaning or purpose behind it.
Yeah.
um, that could be a bit of an obnoxious statement, but I would say that I know in my early days when I was focusing on the money, it was tough. When I went, oh, I have this
Yeah.
many clients, let me double them, and then I have this much money.
Yeah.
Actually, my efficiency went down.
Yeah.
My leads went a little bit cold. But when I got back to this idea of why am I doing this? Right? I
Yeah.
believe that people matter. I believe that people have the right to choose a life that is meaningful for them within the confines of their privilege
Yeah.
and their circumstances. But I made it more about contributing to that. It
Mm.
flowed. So I think if people come into it for the money, it's probably not the right gig. Let the money follow your passion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as we flow into that, there is this whole new world happening, right? With AI and how there are many organizations that are pushing the democratizing of coaching as you've seen it
Mm,
and I've seen it. Obviously, there are comments on both sides of the fence, but it's all right. Where do you see that future, well, at least in the next couple of years, land
mm.
for us as an industry?
It's a really important time.
Yeah.
Democratizing coaching, giving access to far more people, I think is a really valuable proposition. The place I think it's going to be interesting to watch how it evolves. It's a bit like the idea of all lorry drivers are removed with and replaced by trucks that drive themselves. Um, it has its place and there's an impact, right? So you have a lot of coaches who've built businesses out of their reputations,
Yeah.
certain pricing structures in the markets they live in, and stuff like that. So I think there's something to be said about watching how that sort of happens in parallel. I also think that people who've been in it for a while will find new ways to almost hold and nurture that evolution. I would
Mm.
definitely be mindful of not fighting it because the world is changing, as you said.
Yeah.
So I think the question is for people like you or I or others who've been around for a while, what role can we play in helping facilitate that, bring that more to life? I've been working with an organization recently where the executive coaches are getting paid extraordinary amounts of money. At the same time, they want to democratize it through one of the many platforms that we know exist out there today. And coaches are probably earning 5 times, 10 times less than they can in the sort of the executive direct coaching world.
Yeah.
If I think about it in a sort of an ideal vision kind of way, we're all doing a bit of both. So that people who've taken lots of risks and have been courageous in leaving jobs or moving families or undertaking training with no guaranteed outcome and so on, people who've worked hard, I think, should continue to get the rewards for what they've created for themselves.
Yeah.
I also think we have a responsibility as a community to be contributing to helping create access for others. And I think it's going there anyway. I think in the end, how much coaches, new and old, want to contribute to that will shape it a little bit. But I do think it's important that we create as much access as possible to people.
Yeah.
The world is full of people who are hungry to be listened to. So let's make that happen as much as possible. That would be my sense.
Definitely, Andrew. I had an opportunity recently to work with a client in Africa, and to be frank, it was the most amazing time I had with them for the last 6 months. And I would say that that whole region is waking up to the importance of that human factor. We've experienced it in this side of the world, I guess, and we've somehow even taken it for granted, right? It's all part of it. But when we are working with different regions and they're just coming to, right? And even coaching, I would dare say it's still pretty new in some parts. You're right. There is this whole need for us to keep focus and doing the good thing and to spread the word and to let more people have access to what we have experienced and how it has changed our lives.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we've talked a lot about many areas. I'm just wondering if you've got any final thoughts before we take leave from this beautiful interview.
If you're a newer coach, get the training that feels like a good fit for you. It's worth taking the time to do that well. If you're a more long-standing coach, I think it's probably a good time for us to be thinking about what does our contribution to this industry and community look like, over the next 10 years. I think these are good reflections for us all to be in. I also want to quote something that came from a dear friend of mine in LA quite some years ago. We were talking about this idea of we're always looking for themes, right? When we're working with our clients, like what are the themes or the narratives that always show up? And she had this great statement, and she got it from an author whose name escapes me, which is kind of embarrassing right now. But she always just said, "How we deal with the issue is the issue." And I kind of wished I'd heard that when I was starting coaching, because it was so easy to get distracted by the topic or the presenting topic or the occasional problem. But rather our relationship to those things is a far more interesting and an effective place to be working, right? So I just love the way she said it. How we deal with the issue is the issue. And I think it's always a good thing to keep in mind when we're in front of people who are, getting curious about the direction their lives are going in, and are they in sync with what they want, or are they getting in their own way?
Wow. So much truth in that one short statement. To me, it talks about what you also focus on becomes, right? And it's just amazing of how, if we can focus on the right things and, as you say, in the right relationships and invest in it, it's going to be much more beautiful, and we'll probably live in a more beautiful world as well.
I think so. It would be nice, right? Simpler, more open, a more thoughtful world. I think we could all do with a lot more of that, right?
You're amazing, Andrew. I really thank you for your time and your generosity in just, sharing your heart out in today's interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now I was humbled to be asked, and it's great to hang out with you and get to exchange on these important topics, I think, right? And some good things out here. But yeah, thank you for having me on your show. Really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Well, this has been the 100 Master Coaches show today with Andrew, myself, Mel. We're saying take care wherever you are, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.
You have been watching the 100 Master Coaches series with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. Brought to you by Catalyst Coach. www.catalystcoach.live. We will be right back with our next Master Coach on the 100 Master Coaches series.